The moment I stepped into the marble lobby of the Grandview Conference Hotel, dragging my black roller suitcase behind me, I never expected to become someone's personal servant. I had just flown 6 hours from San Francisco to Chicago for the biggest tech conference of the year, wearing my favorite worn jeans and a comfortable sweater because I always dress down when traveling. That's when a young man in an expensive navy suit spotted me and assumed the worst. He marched over with two designer leather bags and barked, "Grab my bags, driver," before literally throwing his luggage at my feet. The heavy cases landed with a thud that echoed through the crowded lobby as dozens of conference attendees turned to stare. I bent down and picked up the bags without saying a word, studying the young man who had just humiliated me in front of half the tech industry. He couldn't have been older than 22, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confident smirk that screamed privilege. His suit probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and the gold watch on his wrist caught the light as he adjusted his tie with satisfaction. "Thanks, lady," he said dismissively, not even bothering to look at me as he pulled out his phone. "Make sure you don't scratch anything. Those bags cost more than you probably make in a month." As I stood there holding his luggage, I listened to him talk loudly into his phone, clearly wanting everyone around us to hear. "Yeah, Dad, I made it to the conference. This is going to be huge for my career. I'm already networking with the right people, if you know what I mean. No time to waste on nobodies." The irony wasn't lost on me. My name is Gianna, and at 34 years old, I've built two successful technology companies from absolutely nothing. I sold my first startup when I was 28 for $40 million after developing innovative cybersecurity software in my garage. My second company, which focuses on artificial intelligence solutions for small businesses, is currently valued at over $200 million. In about 18 hours, I would be delivering the keynote speech at this very conference about women breaking barriers in technology leadership. But this entitled young man had no idea who I was, and I decided not to enlighten him just yet. I watched him strut toward the registration desk, his chest puffed out like a peacock displaying his feathers. He cut in front of an elderly woman in line, not even acknowledging her presence, as he demanded immediate attention from the harassed-looking conference volunteer behind the table. "Tyler Brennan," he announced loudly. "I'm here for the internship program with Morrison Tech Solutions. I need my VIP access badge and all the premium networking event invitations. My father specifically arranged for me to have front row access to everything important this weekend." The volunteer, a tired-looking woman in her 50s named Janet, according to her name tag, fumbled through a stack of registration packets. Tyler drummed his fingers impatiently on the table, sighing dramatically every few seconds to show his displeasure with the speed of service. "Here we are, Mr. Brennan," Janet said politely, handing him a thick folder. "Your internship coordinator will meet you at the welcome reception tonight. The schedule includes—" "Yeah, whatever," Tyler interrupted, snatching the packet from her hands. "Just make sure I get seated with the real decision makers, not stuck at some kid's table with the other interns. I'm not here to make friends with people who can't help my career." He spun around and nearly collided with me, still standing there with his bags like an obedient hotel employee. For a split second, our eyes met, and I saw something that made my stomach turn. It wasn't just entitlement or rudeness. It was a complete lack of recognition that I was even human. To him, I was invisible, existing only to serve his needs. "Oh, you're still here," he said with annoyance. "Well, don't just stand there gawking. Take those bags up to room 1215 and make sure they're arranged properly in the closet. I have important people to meet." He tossed a crumpled $5 bill at my feet and walked away without another glance, leaving me standing in the lobby with his expensive luggage and a growing fire in my chest. Around me, other conference attendees had witnessed the entire exchange, their faces showing mixtures of shock, embarrassment, and secondhand humiliation. But as I bent down to pick up that crumpled bill, I smiled. Tyler Brennan had just made the biggest mistake of his young life, and he had no idea what was coming for him. The Morrison Tech Solutions Company was one of my biggest competitors, and I knew their CEO personally. We had served on several industry panels together, and I was fairly certain that their internship program was highly selective and prestigious. Young Tyler had probably worked very hard to secure his position, or more likely, his wealthy father had pulled some serious strings to get him placed there. What Tyler didn't know was that his behavior in the next 24 hours would determine whether he had any future in the technology industry at all. I carefully carried his bags to the hotel's concierge desk and explained the situation to the professional staff member there. A young man asked me to deliver these to room 1215, but I'm not comfortable going to someone's hotel room alone. Could you please handle this for him? The concierge, a distinguished man in his 40s named Robert, took the bags with a knowing look in his eyes. Of course, ma'am, I saw what happened in the lobby. That was completely inappropriate behavior, and I apologize on behalf of the hotel. We'll make sure these are delivered properly. Thank you, Robert. That's very kind of you. As I walked toward the elevators to check into my own suite, I couldn't stop thinking about Tyler's dismissive attitude and cruel assumptions. His behavior reminded me of every obstacle I had faced as a woman building companies in the male-dominated tech industry, the countless times I had been mistaken for someone's assistant instead of the CEO. The meetings where venture capitalists had directed all their questions to my male colleagues instead of me. The industry events where other entrepreneurs had assumed I was someone's wife or girlfriend rather than a serious business owner. But Tyler's behavior went beyond simple sexism or professional dismissiveness. What I had witnessed was pure class-based cruelty, the kind of casual dehumanization that wealthy people sometimes inflict on those they perceive as beneath them economically. He had looked at my travel clothes and immediately categorized me as hired help, someone unworthy of basic courtesy or respect. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the 15th floor where my suite was located. As the elevator climbed, I thought about my keynote speech scheduled for tomorrow morning. I had spent weeks preparing a presentation about the importance of inclusive leadership and creating opportunities for people from all backgrounds to succeed in technology. Tomorrow, Tyler Brennan would learn firsthand what it meant to make assumptions about people based on their appearance. And I had a feeling it would be a lesson he would never forget. The conference's opening night networking reception was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, a stunning space with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. 500 of the most influential people in the technology industry mingled over cocktails and appetizers, their conversations creating a buzz of excitement about the weekend ahead. I had deliberately chosen to wear a simple black dress and minimal jewelry, nothing that would immediately scream, millionaire tech entrepreneur. I wanted to blend in with the crowd and observe how people really behaved when they thought no one important was watching. That strategy proved more effective than I had imagined. Tyler made his entrance about 20 minutes after I arrived, and it was impossible to miss him. He had changed into an even more expensive-looking charcoal gray suit, and his confidence had somehow increased since our encounter in the lobby. He moved through the room like a shark, immediately identifying the most influential-looking groups of people and inserting himself into their conversation. I positioned myself at the bar, ordering a glass of wine and watching Tyler work the room with the kind of aggressive networking that made everyone around him visibly uncomfortable. He interrupted ongoing conversations, name-dropped his father's hedge fund within minutes of meeting new people, and showed absolutely no interest in listening to what anyone else had to say. "Excuse me, miss," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Tyler standing there with an irritated expression on his face. "I was here first. You need to move so I can order my drink." This was completely untrue. I had been at the bar for at least 10 minutes and Tyler had just walked over. But rather than argue, I simply stepped aside and watched him flag down the bartender with an imperious wave. "Grey Goose Martini, extra dirty, 3 olives," he demanded. "And make it strong. I'm networking with some very important people tonight, and I need to stay sharp." The bartender, a professional woman in her 30s named Elisa, prepared his drink while Tyler continued talking loudly about his family's connections and his bright future in technology. When she placed the martini in front of him, he didn't say thank you or acknowledge her effort in any way. He simply grabbed the glass and walked away, leaving no tip. I watched this entire interaction with growing disgust, then ordered another glass of wine for myself and left a $20 tip for Lisa, who smiled gratefully. Thank you so much, she whispered. That young man has been incredibly rude to all the service staff tonight. We really appreciate guests like you who treat us with respect. Of course, I replied. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their job. As I moved away from the bar, I noticed Tyler had inserted himself into a conversation between three senior executives from major technology companies. The executives, two men and one woman, were clearly trying to be polite, but Tyler's interruptions and self-promotional monologue were making them increasingly uncomfortable. My father always tells me that success in business comes down to knowing the right people, Tyler was saying loudly. That's why I don't waste time talking to diversity hires or people who obviously aren't serious players. I can spot real talent and influence from across the room. The female executive, whom I recognized as Sarah Chen from Microsoft, looked appalled by his comment about diversity hires. She glanced around the room with obvious discomfort, clearly wanting to escape the conversation. That's an interesting perspective, she said diplomatically, though I think you might be surprised by where real innovation comes from. Some of our most successful products have been developed by people who don't fit the traditional mold. Tyler laughed dismissively. Look, I'm sure there are exceptions, but let's be realistic. The big decisions and the real money get made by people like us. People from the right families with the right connections and the right education. Everything else is just political correctness. I felt my jaw clench as I listened to his casual bigotry. This wasn't just youthful arrogance or inexperience. This was deeply ingrained prejudice disguised as business wisdom. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of dinner service. The hotel staff had arranged elegant round tables throughout the ballroom, each seating 8 people for a formal 3-course meal. I found my assigned table and settled in with 7 other conference attendees, introducing myself simply as Gianna from San Francisco when asked about my background. That's when Tyler appeared at our table, studying the place cards with a frown. This can't be right, he announced to the table. I specifically requested to be seated with C-level executives and venture capitalists. This table looks like it's full of... He paused, scanning our faces with obvious disappointment. Well, it's clearly not the right level for someone in my position. One of my table mates, an elderly gentleman named Frank, who had founded 3 successful startups in the 1980s, raised an eyebrow. And what position would that be, young man? I'm a management intern at Morrison Tech Solutions, Tyler replied proudly. My father is Harrison Brennan from Brennan Capital Management. Maybe you've heard of him. He manages over $2 billion in assets. Frank smiled politely. I'm familiar with the firm. Please have a seat. I'm sure we can have an interesting conversation about the industry. Tyler reluctantly sat down, clearly disappointed by what he perceived as a table full of unimportant people. Throughout the first course, he dominated the conversation with stories about his family's wealth and his plans to quickly climb the corporate ladder at Morrison Tech. The key, he explained while cutting his salmon, is to identify the decision makers immediately and focus all your energy on impressing them. There's no point wasting time on people who can't advance your career. That's just basic strategy. An older woman sitting across from me, named Dorothy, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. That seems like a rather transactional approach to building relationships, she said quietly. Tyler shrugged. Business isn't about making friends. It's about results and connections. My father taught me that the people who succeed are the ones who understand how power really works in America. You have to be realistic about social hierarchies and focus your efforts accordingly. I noticed that Dorothy looked hurt by his dismissive tone. She had been trying to engage him in conversation about technology trends, but Tyler had brushed off her questions as unimportant. What he didn't know was that Dorothy had been one of the first female software engineers at IBM in the 1970s and had helped develop some of the foundational technologies that modern computers still rely on. But Tyler saw an older woman in a conservative dress and immediately categorized her as irrelevant to his ambitions. The final straw came during dessert service when Tyler flagged down our server with an aggressive wave. "Hey, waiter," he called out loudly. "This bread pudding is cold and the coffee tastes like dishwater. I don't know what kind of operation you're running here, but this is completely unacceptable for a conference of this caliber." The server, a young man who couldn't have been much older than Tyler himself, apologized profusely and offered to bring a replacement dessert. But Tyler wasn't finished. "You know what? Forget it. Just bring me the check for my portion of the meal. I'm not paying full price for this kind of sloppy service. And the next time, maybe train your staff to recognize when they're serving important guests." The entire table sat in stunned silence as Tyler threw his napkin down and stood up abruptly. Frank, Dorothy, and the other guests exchanged horrified glances as our server hurried away with tears in his eyes. "That was completely unnecessary," Frank said firmly. "That young man was doing his job perfectly well, and you humiliated him for no reason." Tyler looked genuinely confused by the criticism. "Look, sir, I appreciate that you want to be nice to the help, but these people need to understand that there are standards to maintain. If you don't demand excellence, you will never get it." He walked away from the table without another word, leaving the rest of us to apologize to our embarrassed server and reassure him that Tyler's behavior didn't represent how the other guests felt. As I watched Tyler disappear into the crowd, I realized that tomorrow's keynote speech had just become much more personal than I had originally planned. After the disastrous dinner, I decided to take a walk around the hotel to clear my head and process what I had witnessed. The Grand View's lobby was much quieter now, with most conference attendees either continuing to network in the bar or retiring to their rooms for the evening. That's when I noticed the elderly janitor working near the registration desk, quietly emptying trash cans and wiping down surfaces while trying to remain invisible to the remaining guests. He was a small man, probably in his 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His name tag read, Carlos, and he moved with the careful efficiency of someone who had been doing this job for many years. I was about to head to the elevators when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Hey, old man, did you not see this mess I made?" I turned around to see Tyler standing near the hotel's coffee station, where he had apparently spilled sugar and cream all over the marble counter and floor. Carlos hurried over with his cleaning supplies, moving as quickly as his aging legs would allow. "I'm very sorry, sir," Carlos said in accented English. "I will clean this right away." "You should have been watching more carefully," Tyler snapped. "This is exactly the kind of sloppy attention to detail that shows why some people never advance beyond minimum wage jobs. Maybe if you focused more on doing your job and less on whatever else you're thinking about, accidents like this wouldn't happen." Carlos began cleaning the spill without responding, his face showing the practiced neutrality of someone who had endured this kind of treatment before. But I could see the hurt in his eyes, and something inside me snapped. I walked over to where they were standing and knelt down next to Carlos, helping him clean up the mess that Tyler had clearly made intentionally. "Por favor, no se preocupe," I said softly in Spanish, telling him not to worry. "Este joven no tiene modales, pero eso no es su culpa." This young man has no manners, but that's not your fault. Carlos looked up at me in surprise, his face brightening slightly when he realized I was speaking his native language. "Muchas gracias, señora. Usted es muy amable." "Thank you, ma'am. You are very kind." Tyler stared at us with obvious disgust. Oh, great. Another bleeding heart liberal who thinks being nice to the help makes them a better person. Let me guess you probably give money to homeless people too, thinking you're making a difference. I stood up slowly and looked Tyler directly in the eyes. Treating people with basic human dignity isn't political, Tyler. It's just being a decent person. "How do you know my name?" he asked suspiciously. "You've been announcing it to everyone you meet since you arrived," I replied calmly. along with your father's net worth and your opinions about who deserves respect in American society. Tyler laughed mockingly. Look, lady, I don't know who you think you are, but let me give you some free advice. If you want to succeed in business, you need to understand that time and energy are limited resources. Successful people focus on relationships that can actually help them achieve their goals. Wasting time on janitors and servers might make you feel good about yourself, but it's not going to advance your career. I glanced at Carlos, who was listening to our conversation while continuing to clean. His English was better than Tyler assumed, and he understood exactly what was being said about him. What if I told you that some of the most successful people I know started out in jobs like Carlos's? I asked Tyler. Then I'd say you're either lying or you hang around with very different people than I do, Tyler replied smugly. My father didn't build a $2 billion investment firm by wasting time on people who can't help him make money. That's just reality. Tyler pulled out his phone and started typing. Actually, this whole conversation is giving me great material for my social media. Networking tip: don't let random do gooders distract you from your real objectives at important industry events. My followers are going to love this. He held up his phone to take a selfie with Carlos cleaning in the background, clearly planning to mock the situation online. That's when I reached out and gently pushed his phone down. Don't, I said quietly, but with an edge to my voice that made Tyler take a step back. Excuse me, Tyler said, suddenly less confident. Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? Before I could answer, Carlos stood up and spoke directly to Tyler in careful English. Sir, I have been working at this hotel for 15 years. I have 3 jobs to pay for my granddaughter's medical treatments. She has leukemia, and the doctors say she will be okay, but the bills are very expensive. I work here at a grocery store and cleaning office buildings at night. I am not ashamed of my work because it helps my family. Tyler looked uncomfortable for the first time since I had met him. That's that's great, old man. Good for you, but I still don't see what that has to do with me. It has to do with treating people like human beings instead of invisible servants, I said firmly. Carlos has probably forgotten more about hard work and dedication than you'll ever learn. Tyler's discomfort quickly turned back to arrogance. Look, I feel bad for the guy's family situation, but that doesn't change the fact that some people are in service positions and other people are in leadership positions. That's just how the world works. I'm going to be running companies someday, and guys like Carlos are going to be cleaning my offices. That's not cruel, it's just realistic. I felt a surge of anger that I had to work hard to control. This young man's casual cruelty and complete lack of empathy were beyond anything I had expected, even from someone with his privileged background. You know what, Tyler, I said calmly. I think you're right that some people are destined for leadership positions, but I don't think you understand as much about who those people are as you think you do. Tyler looked confused by my response, but before he could ask what I meant, 2 hotel security guards approached us. Excuse me, is there a problem here? The taller guard asked, looking primarily at me and Carlos. Tyler immediately perked up, seeing an opportunity to assert his perceived authority. Yes, actually, there is a problem, Tyler said officiously. This woman has been harassing me and interfering with hotel operations. I don't think she's supposed to be in the VIP areas of the hotel, and she's been bothering other guests all evening. The security guards looked at me expectantly, waiting for my response. I quietly reached into my purse and pulled out my conference badge, showing it to the head of security, a distinguished-looking man named Marcus. Marcus studied my badge carefully, and his eyes widened slightly when he read it. I apologize, ma'am. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Is there anything we can do to help you? Tyler couldn't see my badge from where he was standing, but he assumed that security had asked me to leave. Thank you for handling this professionally, he told Marcus. I know it can't be easy dealing with people who don't belong in upscale establishments. Marcus looked at Tyler with barely concealed disgust. Sir, I can assure you that this guest belongs here more than most. Now, is there anything else we can help you with tonight? Tyler strutted away, satisfied, completely unaware of what had just happened. He probably assumed that I had been quietly asked to return to my room or leave the hotel entirely. As I watched him disappear around the corner, I made a decision about tomorrow's keynote speech. Tyler Brennan was about to learn that assumptions based on appearances could be very dangerous things. I spent most of that night rewriting my keynote presentation, adding new sections inspired by Tyler's behavior and Carlos's quiet dignity. My original speech had focused on traditional barriers to women in technology leadership. But after witnessing Tyler's casual cruelty, I realized I needed to address something broader and more fundamental about how we treat each other in professional environments. By 3 in the morning, I had crafted what I believed would be the most important speech of my career. It wasn't just about breaking glass ceilings anymore. It was about breaking down the walls of assumption and prejudice that keep people from seeing each other's true worth. I finally fell asleep around 4, but I woke up early, feeling more energized than I had in months. Today, Tyler Brennan would learn that the world doesn't always work the way he thinks it does. The conference's main auditorium was already buzzing with activity when I arrived for my sound check at 7:30. 500 seats filled the space with additional standing room for overflow attendees. The event was being live streamed to thousands more viewers around the world, and several technology journalists were setting up cameras and recording equipment. Patricia Williams, the conference director, met me backstage to go over the final details of my presentation. Patricia was a brilliant woman in her early 50s who had built the Tech Future Conference into the most prestigious gathering in the industry over the past decade. Gianna, I have to tell you, the anticipation for your keynote is incredible, Patricia said as we tested my wireless microphone. We've had more registration requests in the past month than ever before. People are really excited to hear from someone who built 2 successful companies before turning 35. I smiled thinking about Tyler sitting in the front row with no idea what was coming. I think this presentation is going to be memorable for everyone involved. The audience is particularly excited because we've kept your identity confidential until this morning, Patricia continued. Most people know we have a major female entrepreneur speaking, but they don't know who. It's created this wonderful air of mystery and anticipation. Through a gap in the stage curtains, I could see the auditorium filling up with attendees. The front row was reserved for special guests and VIP badge holders, and sure enough, Tyler had claimed the center seat like a throne. He was wearing his lucky suit from yesterday, the one he had given me to take to laundry services the night before. That suit reminded me of our final encounter at the hotel elevators. Tyler had spotted me waiting for the elevator around 11 p.m., still wearing my simple black dress from the networking reception. Without hesitation, he had walked over and handed me a garment bag full of his dirty clothes. I need this cleaned and pressed by tomorrow morning, he had said matter-of-factly. Use extra starch on the shirt and make sure there are no wrinkles anywhere. This is my lucky suit for important presentations, and it needs to be perfect. I had accepted the garment bag without saying a word, which Tyler took as confirmation that I was indeed hotel housekeeping staff. Here's $5 for your trouble, he had said, pulling a crumpled bill from his wallet. But seriously, don't mess this up. Tomorrow is the biggest day of my career so far, and I need to look absolutely perfect for some very important people. The elevator had arrived, and Tyler had stepped inside while I remained in the hallway holding his dirty laundry. Thanks again, cleaning lady, he had called out as the doors closed. I'll be sure to mention your excellent service to the hotel management if everything goes well. Of course, I had immediately taken the garment bag to the hotel's professional laundry service and paid for expedited cleaning and pressing. Tyler's suit had been delivered to his room spotless and perfectly pressed, just as he had requested. I wasn't cruel, and I genuinely wanted his clothes to look good for what was about to happen. Now, as I watched Tyler adjust that same suit jacket while chatting confidently with other front row attendees, I felt a mixture of anticipation and something I can only describe as educational excitement. Tyler was about to receive the most valuable lesson of his young life, and I was going to be his teacher. 5 minutes until we begin, Patricia announced. Gianna, you look absolutely radiant. I have a feeling this is going to be a career-defining moment for you. I took a deep breath and checked my appearance one final time in the backstage mirror. I had chosen a sophisticated navy blue blazer and matching skirt paired with a simple white blouse and my grandmother's pearl necklace. Professional, confident, and unmistakably successful. Ladies and gentlemen, I heard Patricia's voice echo through the auditorium sound system. Welcome to the 15th annual Tech Future Conference. This morning, we have the extraordinary privilege of hearing from one of the most innovative entrepreneurs of her generation. Through the curtains, I could see Tyler leaning forward in his seat, probably hoping to make eye contact with the mystery speaker and establish some kind of connection that might benefit his career later. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Gianna Rodriguez, founder and CEO of Secure Logic Systems and current CEO of AI Bridge Solutions, who will be sharing her insights on building inclusive leadership cultures in the technology industry. I heard the thunderous applause as Patricia announced my full name and credentials, and I smiled as I imagined Tyler's face when he realized who I was. The moment I had been waiting for since yesterday afternoon had finally arrived. I walked onto the stage with confidence, approached the podium, and looked out at an audience of 500 of the most influential people in technology. And there, sitting in the front row center seat, wearing his perfectly pressed lucky suit, was Tyler Brennan. His face had gone completely white, and his mouth was hanging open in shock. I could see him frantically trying to process what was happening, probably running through every interaction we had shared in the past 24 hours. I adjusted the microphone, smiled warmly at the audience, and prepared to deliver the most important speech of my professional career. But first, I had some unfinished business to address. The auditorium fell silent as I approached the microphone, 500 faces looking up at me expectantly. The stage lights were bright and warm, and I could feel the weight of this moment settling around me like a comfortable blanket. This was my element, standing in front of influential people, sharing ideas that could change how the entire industry operates. But my eyes kept returning to Tyler in the front row. He was frozen in his seat like a deer caught in headlights, his face pale with growing comprehension of exactly how badly he had misjudged the situation. I could see him replaying our encounters in his mind. The luggage in the lobby, his dismissive comments at dinner, the laundry bag in the elevator, and realizing that each interaction had been with the woman who was now standing on the most important stage in technology. Good morning, everyone, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's excellent sound system. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces and to meet new colleagues who are shaping the future of our industry. The audience responded with warm applause, but Tyler remained motionless, apparently still processing the reality of his situation. I want to start today with a story, I continued, about assumptions, appearances, and what happens when we judge people based on incomplete information. I paused deliberately and let my gaze sweep across the front row, lingering just long enough on Tyler to make sure he understood that this story was going to be very personal for at least one person in the audience. Yesterday afternoon, I arrived at this hotel wearing comfortable travel clothes after a long flight from San Francisco. I was tired, I was dragging my suitcase, and I probably looked like any other traveler who had spent 6 hours in airports and airplanes. Several people in the audience smiled and nodded in recognition, clearly relating to the experience of arriving at conferences looking less than perfectly professional. That's when a young man approached me in the lobby, took one look at my appearance, and decided I must be hired help. Without asking my name, my background, or even if I worked for the hotel, he threw his expensive luggage at my feet and ordered me to carry it to his room. A murmur of surprise and disapproval rippled through the audience. This was clearly not the kind of opening story they had expected from a keynote about leadership and innovation. Tyler had sunk lower in his seat, and I could see sweat beginning to form on his forehead despite the air conditioning in the auditorium. Now I could have corrected his assumption immediately, I continued. I could have shown him my speaker credentials or introduced myself properly, but instead I decided to see what would happen if I let him continue believing what he wanted to believe about who I was. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. In the back of the auditorium, I could see conference staff and security personnel positioning themselves near the exits, probably sensing that something unusual was about to happen. Over the next 24 hours, this young man continued to treat me as if I were invisible, unimportant, and unworthy of basic courtesy. He interrupted my conversations, took my seat at dinner, and even handed me his dirty laundry while assuming I was housekeeping staff. More murmurs from the audience, louder this time, with clear notes of anger and disgust. These were successful professional people who understood exactly how inappropriate such behavior was in any context. Tyler was now visibly shaking his hands, gripping the arms of his chair, as if he were trying to physically anchor himself to his seat. But the most disturbing part wasn't his treatment of me, I said, my voice taking on a harder edge. It was watching how he treated other people he perceived as beneath him economically or socially. I watched him humiliate servers, berate hotel staff, and speak dismissively about anyone he considered unworthy of his attention. I paused and took a sip of water, letting the tension in the room build while Tyler squirmed in his front row seat. This young man told me repeatedly that successful people focus their energy only on relationships that can advance their careers. He explained that treating service workers with kindness was a waste of time that would prevent him from networking with the right people. He even tried to take a mocking photograph of an elderly janitor to post on social media as an example of people he considered beneath his notice. The audience's reaction was immediate and visceral. People began shifting in their seats, whispering to each other and looking around the room to see if they could identify the person I was describing. Now, before I continue with today's presentation about building inclusive leadership cultures, I need to address something important about respect assumptions and professional accountability. I stepped away from the podium, slightly moving closer to the edge of the stage so I could look directly down at Tyler. The young man I've been describing is sitting in our front row this morning. 500 heads turned toward the front section of the auditorium, scanning the VIP seating area as Tyler seemed to shrink further into his chair. "Sir, would you please stand up?" Tyler remained frozen, apparently hoping that if he stayed perfectly still, somehow the situation would resolve itself or I would move on to something else. I'm talking to you, Tyler Brennan from Morrison Tech Solutions. The mention of his name sent a shockwave through the auditorium. Suddenly, everyone was looking directly at Tyler, who had no choice but to slowly, reluctantly stand up in his perfectly pressed lucky suit. "Thank you," I said calmly. "Now, Tyler, would you like to share with our audience what you've learned about making assumptions based on people's appearances?" Tyler's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. He looked like he was drowning in his own humiliation, probably trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage his reputation or his career prospects after this moment. I, he stammered, his voice barely audible even with the auditorium's acoustics. "Let me help you out," I said, my tone professional but firm. "Yesterday, you threw luggage at a stranger, demanded she carry your bags, and tipped her $5 for services she never agreed to provide. You treated hotel staff like personal servants, mocked other conference attendees you considered beneath your social status, and even tried to have me removed by security when I defended an elderly employee from your verbal abuse." The audience's reaction was growing louder and more hostile. I could hear voices calling out, "Disgraceful and unacceptable," from various sections of the auditorium. "Tyler, you told me that successful people only invest energy in relationships with others who can advance their careers. You said that treating janitors and servers with kindness was a waste of time that would prevent you from networking with important people." I paused and smiled slightly, preparing for the moment I had been building toward since yesterday afternoon. "Well, Tyler, I have some feedback about your networking strategy." The tension in the auditorium was electric as Tyler stood trembling in the front row, still unable to form coherent words, while 500 pairs of eyes stared at him with a mixture of disgust and fascination. "Tyler," I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the silent auditorium, "let me introduce myself properly since we never had the chance yesterday. My name is Gianna Rodriguez. At 28, I sold my first company, Secure Logic Systems, for $40 million after developing cybersecurity software that's now used by 60% of Fortune 500 companies. I could see Tyler's face growing paler with each word as the full scope of his mistake became clear. I currently serve as CEO of AI Bridge Solutions, which provides artificial intelligence consulting to small and medium sized businesses. Last month, we completed our Series C funding round, bringing our company valuation to $210 million. Murmurs of recognition rippled through the audience as people began connecting my name and credentials to articles they had read or presentations they had seen at other conferences. I serve on the advisory boards of three venture capital firms, including Morrison Capital Partners, which I believe has some connection to your current internship program, Tyler. I was named to Forbes' list of most influential women in technology for the past 3 consecutive years, and MIT invited me to deliver their commencement address for computer science graduates last spring. Tyler looked like he was about to faint. He was gripping the back of the chair in front of him for support, and I could see other front row attendees shifting uncomfortably away from him. So, when you told me that successful people focus only on relationships that can advance their careers, you were absolutely correct, Tyler. But perhaps you should have taken your own advice more seriously. The audience erupted in nervous laughter, but the sound had an edge to it that made it clear people were more appalled than amused. You see, Tyler, while you were busy dismissing me as unworthy of your attention, you missed an opportunity to network with someone who could have genuinely helped your career. While you were explaining to me why janitors and servers don't deserve basic courtesy, you were revealing exactly the kind of character that successful companies work very hard to avoid hiring. I moved closer to this edge of the stage, looking directly down at Tyler with a mixture of disappointment and resolve. Your behavior over the past 24 hours has shown me everything I need to know about your leadership potential, your professional judgment, and your basic human decency. And I'm not the only one who's been paying attention. I gestured toward the audience where I could see several people holding up smartphones clearly recording the entire exchange. Tyler, this keynote speech is being live streamed to over 10,000 viewers worldwide. Your name, your company, and your behavior are now permanently associated with this moment. When potential employers search for your name online, this will be what they find. Tyler finally found his voice, though it came out as a desperate whisper that the microphone barely picked up. "Please," he said. "I didn't know who you were. I made a mistake. I can learn from this." "You're right, Tyler. You made a mistake. But your mistake wasn't failing to recognize me as someone successful. Your mistake was treating another human being as if they were invisible and worthless." I paused to let that distinction sink in both for Tyler and for the audience. "Yesterday evening, you humiliated Carlos the janitor, who has worked at this hotel for 15 years while supporting his granddaughter's cancer treatments. You mocked our dinner server for bringing you food that was perfectly acceptable. You tried to take a degrading photograph of hotel staff to post on social media for your followers' entertainment." The audience was completely silent now, but I could feel their anger and disgust building with each detail I revealed. "Those actions had nothing to do with failing to recognize my professional credentials, Tyler. They had to do with your character, your values, and your fundamental lack of empathy for other people." I straightened up and addressed the audience directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face a choice in our industry about what kind of leaders we want to develop and promote. Do we want leaders who judge people's worth based on their appearance, their economic status, or their job titles? Do we want leaders who treat service workers as invisible and unworthy of basic courtesy?" The audience responded with a firm chorus of "no" that echoed through the auditorium. "Or do we want leaders who understand that innovation, creativity, and success can come from anyone, regardless of their background or current circumstances?" This time, the yes was even louder and more emphatic. I turned back to Tyler, who was still standing but looked like he might collapse at any moment. "Tyler, you told me yesterday that you plan to be running companies someday and that people like Carlos would be cleaning your offices. Let me tell you something about leadership that your father apparently never taught you." I moved to the very edge of the stage, speaking directly to him with complete authority. "Real leaders understand that the person emptying your trash can might have ideas that could revolutionize your business. Real leaders know that the server bringing your coffee might be working their way through engineering school and could become your most valuable employee. Real leaders treat every person they encounter with dignity and respect, not because it might benefit them professionally, but because it's the right thing to do. The audience burst into sustained applause, but I held up my hand to quiet them because I wasn't finished. Tyler, your behavior yesterday violated every principle of inclusive leadership that successful technology companies are trying to build. Your attitude toward people you perceived as beneath you economically showed exactly the kind of toxic thinking that we must eliminate from our industry. I paused and looked around the auditorium at the cameras, the conference staff, and the 500 influential people who were witnessing this moment. Therefore, before I begin my prepared presentation on building inclusive cultures in technology, I'm going to ask security to escort you out of this auditorium. Your presence here is a distraction from the important work we came here to do, and your behavior has shown that you're not ready to be part of serious conversations about professional leadership. I pointed directly at Tyler and spoke into the microphone with complete authority. Security, please remove this individual from the auditorium immediately. 3 security guards moved quickly down the aisles toward Tyler, who stood frozen in shock as the reality of his situation finally hit him completely. The audience watched in absolute silence as the guards approached the front row, their professional demeanor making it clear that this wasn't a request or a suggestion. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us, Marcus, the head of security said firmly but politely. Tyler looked around desperately, as if hoping someone in the audience might come to his defense or suggest that this was all an elaborate misunderstanding. Instead, he saw 500 faces staring at him with expressions ranging from disgust to pity to complete bewilderment. Wait, Tyler said loudly, his voice cracking with desperation. Please, I can explain. I didn't mean any harm. I was just trying to network and make a good impression. My father, eh? My father is going to kill me if this gets out. The mention of his father sent another wave of murmurs through the audience as people began to understand that Tyler's entitled behavior was probably learned rather than innate. Tyler, I said from the stage, my voice carrying a note of genuine sadness. This isn't about your father or your family connections or your internship. This is about the choices you made and the way you treated people who couldn't fight back. I can change, Tyler pleaded as the security guards flanked him on either side. I can learn from this. Please don't destroy my career before it even starts. I studied his face carefully, looking for signs of genuine remorse, rather than just panic about the consequences of his actions. What I saw was a young man who was sorry he had been caught, but not necessarily sorry about what he had done. Tyler, if you really want to learn from this experience, then use it as an opportunity to examine your assumptions about other people and your responsibilities as a human being. But that learning needs to happen somewhere other than here. The security guards began gently but firmly escorting Tyler toward the exit, and he didn't resist. As they reached the aisle, Tyler turned back toward the stage one final time. I'm sorry, he called out, though whether he was apologizing to me to the audience or to himself was unclear. I believe you are sorry, Tyler, I replied. But sorry isn't enough when your actions have consequences for other people. The auditorium doors closed behind Tyler and the security guards, and suddenly the atmosphere in the room shifted completely. The tension that had been building for the past 10 minutes seemed to evaporate, replaced by a sense of collective relief and anticipation for what would come next. I took a deep breath and smiled at the audience, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Now then, I said, my tone returning to the warm, conversational style I had planned for the presentation. Let's talk about building technology companies where everyone can thrive regardless of their background or circumstances. The audience erupted in enthusiastic applause, clearly ready to move forward with the actual content of the keynote after witnessing such a dramatic example of what not to do in professional settings. Over the next 40 minutes, I delivered what many people later told me was the most powerful presentation they had ever heard about inclusive leadership in technology. I shared stories about my own journey from a working-class background to entrepreneurial success, highlighting the mentors who had believed in my potential when others had dismissed me. I talked about the importance of recognizing talent and innovation in unexpected places, and how companies that embrace diverse perspectives consistently outperform their competitors. I shared research about the correlation between inclusive leadership practices and both employee satisfaction and financial performance. But most importantly, I introduced the Carlos Scholarship Fund, a new initiative I was launching to provide educational opportunities for the children and grandchildren of service workers in the technology industry. Carlos, the janitor, whose dignity Tyler attacked yesterday evening, embodies exactly the kind of work ethic and dedication that our industry needs more of, not less, I explained. His granddaughter is battling leukemia while maintaining a 4.0 grade average in high school. She wants to study computer science, but her family's medical expenses make college financially impossible. I paused to let that information sink in before continuing. Through the Carlos Scholarship Fund, we're going to ensure that students like Carlos's granddaughter have access to the same educational opportunities as students from wealthy families like Tyler's. Because innovation doesn't depend on your parents' net worth. It depends on your curiosity, your dedication, and your willingness to solve problems that matter. The audience's response was immediate and overwhelming. By the end of my presentation, 12 companies had committed to contributing to the scholarship fund, and 6 universities had offered to partner with us to identify deserving students. When I finished speaking, the standing ovation lasted for over 3 minutes. People weren't just applauding my presentation. They were applauding the principle that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their economic status or job title. After the formal presentation ended, I was surrounded by conference attendees who wanted to share their own stories about facing assumptions and overcoming barriers in their careers. The conversations continued through lunch and into the afternoon networking sessions. But the moment that meant the most to me came when Carlos appeared at the edge of the crowd surrounding me during the lunch break. "Senora Rodriguez," he said quietly, tears in his eyes. "I watched your speech on the hotel's employee television. I cannot believe what you have done for my granddaughter. She's going to be so happy." "Carlos, your granddaughter earned this opportunity through her own hard work and dedication," I replied, giving him a warm hug. "I'm just making sure that her talents get the recognition and support they deserve." Later that afternoon, I received a call from Patricia Williams, the conference director. "Gianna, I've been organizing technology conferences for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened this morning," she said. "The video of your keynote has already been viewed over 100,000 times, and it's trending on 3 different social media platforms. I hope it starts some important conversations about how we treat each other in professional environments," I replied. "It's definitely doing that. But I also wanted to let you know that we've received some information about Tyler that you might find interesting." Patricia went on to explain that Morrison Tech Solutions had immediately terminated Tyler's internship after their leadership team watched the live stream of my presentation. His father's investment firm had also issued a public statement distancing themselves from Tyler's behavior and expressing support for the Carlos Scholarship Fund. Most surprisingly, Tyler himself had reached out to Patricia asking for my contact information. He wanted to write a formal apology letter and ask if there was any way he could contribute to the scholarship fund as a form of penance for his actions. 3 weeks later, I received that letter. It was 5 pages long, handwritten, and showed genuine reflection about his behavior and its impact on others. Tyler had also enclosed a check for $5,000 to the Carlos Scholarship Fund, representing his savings from summer jobs over the past 4 years. In the letter, Tyler admitted that his behavior at the conference had forced him to confront some uncomfortable truths about his character and his assumptions about other people. He had enrolled in volunteer work with several local charities and was seeing a counselor to help him understand how his privileged background had shaped his worldview in unhealthy ways. He wasn't asking for forgiveness or trying to repair his professional reputation. He was simply trying to become a better person. I wrote back to thank him for his contribution to the scholarship fund and to encourage him to continue his journey of personal growth. I told him that while his actions at the conference had been completely unacceptable, his willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and work to change showed the kind of character development that gives people second chances. 6 months later, Carlos's granddaughter received her first semester tuition check for computer science classes at Northwestern University. She sent me a handwritten thank you note explaining that she wanted to specialize in medical technology to help other families facing serious illnesses. Tyler never returned to the technology industry, but according to mutual acquaintances, he became a social worker specializing in helping at-risk youth from low-income backgrounds. He apparently found that his experience with privilege and its pitfalls gave him unique insights into helping young people avoid the same mistakes he had made. The Carlos Scholarship Fund has now provided educational support to over 200 students, and 12 major technology companies have adopted inclusive leadership training programs based on the principles I outlined in that keynote presentation. But the lesson that has stayed with me most powerfully from that weekend is this: how we treat people who can't help us professionally reveals everything about our character. True leadership isn't about networking with the right people or making the right connections. It's about recognizing the humanity and potential in everyone we encounter, regardless of their current circumstances. Every person you meet is fighting battles. You know nothing about carrying dreams you can't imagine and possessing talents that might surprise you if you take the time to look beyond surface appearances. The janitor might be supporting a future doctor. The server might be working their way through engineering school. The person in worn jeans dragging a suitcase through a hotel lobby might be the keynote speaker who could change your entire industry. Tyler learned that lesson the hard way, but he did eventually learn it. And his transformation from entitled intern to dedicated social worker proves that even people who make terrible first impressions can grow and change if they're willing to examine their assumptions and work to become better. The choice is always ours. We can judge people based on their appearance and current circumstances, or we can treat everyone with the dignity and respect that human beings deserve. One path leads to missed opportunities and professional humiliation. The other leads to meaningful relationships, unexpected discoveries, and the kind of inclusive leadership that creates real positive change in the world. Have you ever found yourself making assumptions about someone based on their appearance or job title, only to discover later that you were completely wrong? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about times when looking beyond first impressions led to meaningful connections or important lessons. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more about building inclusive cultures in professional environments. And don't forget to share this with colleagues of mine who might benefit from thinking more deeply about how we treat each other in the workplace. Thank you for joining me today, and remember that every interaction we have is an opportunity to choose kindness, respect, and recognition of each other's inherent worth. Let's all commit to building workplaces where everyone can thrive regardless of their background or circumstances.